Hey guys, welcome back. I'm going to do another video. I've had several requests about doing some painting tutorials. By all means, I am not a pro painter at all, but I'll show you guys how I paint my figs. First step, obviously, you take your figs out, cut them off the sprues, clean them up. I usually just clean the flack off with just a little razor blade like this. But once I glue them in to their bases like that, some people like to paint them on the sprue. I just paint them on their bases themselves. You can see there's going to be, depending on, if the bottoms of these do not fill that entire slot there, you're going to have a lot of gaps, those holes. You can get some green stuff at your hobby shops, and then you just kind of mix it together and you mesh it together in your hands, and it turns into almost like a putty type substance there. You can see there now it's like all green. And it's pretty pliable there. So that's what I'm going to do at this point, is just kind of fill in these holes, and then we'll get to the next step, which will be priming them. So I'll just go ahead and go step by step. Okay, so you guys can see that I've got all the green stuff filled in on those gaps there. So I went ahead and did that, the magic of editing. So next point, I'm going to just basically base coat them. So a lot of people like to spray paint them. There's lots of primers and stuff like that. Some people like to primer them light. Some people like to do dark. I like to do dark myself. I think it's probably a more basic technique to go dark as a base coat first, and then just kind of paint lighter as I go. So I'm just going to take some black here, mix a little bit of water with it, so it's a little more just not as thick coming out of the bottle. Usually what I like to do is I like to get several different colors of each area. So for example, like their flesh is going to be green, obviously, but I will pick a couple of different shades of green for that, and then I will be adding black and white to those different shades, so that we have like 3 to 4 or even 5 different variations of green just for their flesh tone, for example. And the same thing will go for their armor and their shirts, their hair, and stuff like that. So just a light coat here. You don't want to put it on too thick, because this is, like I said, it's just a primer coat. It's a base coat. This really kind of helps the other coats or the other paints that you apply to it just stick to the model better. Especially when I'm painting the metal figures, you really kind of got to go light, because the paint sticks well to the metal figures, but after you paint several coats on top of a metal figure, you start to lose a lot of the detail. So the lighter the base coat, the more detail you're going to hold on to the figure. You start putting the paint on too thick, you're going to lose a lot of the sculpting and stuff like that. These are the Moria goblins out of the first box set that came out for the Lord of the Rings that GW put out. So their sculpts are going to be night and day compared to some of the new Hobbit line stuff. I don't know if you guys have seen that, especially the fine cast and even the box set that they put out for the Hobbit movie. Just the sculpts on these new models, the Hobbit line, are just incredible. So I myself have decided to paint my Hobbit line last, after I've painted like basically all of my Lord of the Rings stuff, just because I want to hopefully by then have better skill as I paint more and more models, so that I can hopefully do them justice. If you guys check out some of my other videos, you can see the Bilbo's birthday bash video that I posted up about last month's tournament out in Chicago. I got several people's armies out there, and we got some really talented people out there that do an awesome job. I mean, they're far better than what I'm doing, but you might want to check that out, give you guys an idea of some of the other paint styles that are out there. But yeah, like Tim McKnight, the guy that lives out here, he actually flew out there with me. He got best individual model on the Keeley model, and that's one of those Hobbit models that I was talking about. So if you check that out, I did show all those models in that video, and it's I mean, he did a really awesome job, and you can really see the quality of detail on those Hobbit models versus some of these older Lord of the Rings sculpts. I'm not saying these are bad at all. I'm just saying it's night and day. So that's kind of just, you know, just a base coat there. So I'm going to go ahead and base coat all of these. What I like to do is I like to do a group of them at one time. That way I feel like I'm knocking out some models. So I'll do like, you know, anywhere from 2 to 4 at a time, and just kind of go step by step on all of them, so that when they're all when I'm finished with one model, they're almost all the rest of them come in at the same time. So I'll go ahead and base coat the rest of these. Okay, so I got those base coated now. As you can see here, it's just, like I said, a light coat to cover the model so that the paint will stick better. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and ready and start doing just my primary coat. This is not going to really be anything that's got a great detail, but it's just the basic colors that I want to add to the model. So I'm not really going to worry about keeping everything clean and everything, because that will come as I add other colors. So like, see how I got a little bit there on that armor? I'm not going to sweat that, because when I get to the armor part, I can just clean that up. So a lot of the edges and lines that I'll do will be just basically one coat or one paint hitting another edge or line. So the problem with painting as dark as I have is that sometimes it's hard to see what's what. So you'll just kind of have to know what on the model should be what color. So like, this is his sleeve here, so I'm going to paint their sleeves and their tunics red. So like the tunics are going to be under the armor, and the shirt, or his tunic there. Okay, so I'm putting the green on them now. The green I'm using is the Lorne Forest. This may be the old name. I know Games Workshop renamed a lot of their paints, but this is the green that I'm using here. And this is the darker green of their flesh that I'm going to use. I'm going to actually use, like I said, a couple of different colors on them. But if you look here, I'll show you. See what I'm talking about here? See, we got like this green that's all around the base there. I'm not going to worry about that, because when I go back over this with black, all that's going to disappear. So if you see here, like I've got green on his hair and stuff like that, I'm just more concerned about getting that green strip on the ear there. And then when I go in with the hair and do black, I'll just hit the black here and there, and it'll make this edge form. So you don't have to worry about getting just the ear, and you know, don't sweat it. I mean, it's paint, you just paint right over it. I like to think these guys are kind of feral, so they don't really wear like anything under their armor. It's that they kind of just strap the armor directly onto themselves. So that's why I'm painting flesh here. And then when I go back over the armor here, see, I got little green on that armor right there. When I go back over the armor here, I'm just going to paint that solid, and then paint these metal strips solid too. So it looks like, you know, it's much easier for me to get the green in between first by being a little sloppy, make sure I get it all in there in the crevices, and then when I go over with black or whatever color, just hit those straps, and then it makes a much cleaner edge there. Okay, so we got the green on there. A couple things I want to mention too. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the armor and the hair, and just clean all that stuff up. Is make sure that you keep your brush damp. I always keep, obviously you want to have water and paper towels when you're doing this, but I always keep it damp, and make sure you keep your paints damp too. You don't want your paints drying out. You don't want the brush with the paint on it to dry out. So make sure, even as you're coating, that you constantly, you know, just re-clean your brush, put fresh paint on it, just keep going through. Make sure that your paint is nice and you know, nice and fluid. That way you can help push into some of these areas, like push the pigment into some of these areas where you've got two colors meeting. That way you can let the paint do the filling in for you, and then you don't have to worry about getting inconsistency in your paint or smears or anything like that. Okay, so you can see here I've got one done. And all I did was I just added black to this. So I just went in, and as you can see, I cleaned up the black around the green on the feet, just painted the base, cleaned up the black on the armor, cleaned up the black around the face. And remember how I said we had that ear that was just kind of a blob, like this one here is kind of got a blob on it there. You know, just a little bit of black on both sides of that blob, and you can see you can make that little green on the ear a lot thinner. So yeah, just going, like I said, just making your edges by putting your paints on each, or you know, painting black along the red and green along the red and stuff. That's how you make your edges. Like I said, I wouldn't sweat too much trying to get that little sleeve painted, because you can basically get the edge you need by painting green and then black around it, and then you get your spot. So I'll kind of go over doing a black on one of these next ones just a little bit, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about here. I'll try and zoom in a little bit better so you can see a little bit closer here. So I've got some black on my palette here, and then I put a little bit of water in there just to make it a little runny, not too thin, because then you won't get it to cover, but nice and wet, so that you can kind of just glide over the surface there like this, and just hit that surface, you know, and let the brush just clean up that green like that. And then here on his foot here, just like I said, just let the edge kind of, with it being wet, just glide over there and hit the green on the base, leaving the green on the foot. Got a little bit of red there. And we'll be doing these bases a different color anyways. I'm going to paint them a couple of shades of brown, put some rocks and some grass on them. So we'll go over that part near the end of the tutorial. So you can see how the feet have cleaned up there. And when that dries, it'll look a lot clearer. Like I said, just keep your brush wet. Keep your consistency of your paint nice and thin, a nice thin coat. So you can clean up all that green. So you see how we've got green here on this gauntlet. I'll just paint that black there. There. And you can see how now the ear is cleaned up, and we've got a nice clean edge on that shoulder there. So I'll go ahead and get black on the rest of these guys. Okay, so we got all four of those guys base coated now. So we've got basically they're tournament legal. If you wanted to play in a tournament, I think GW usually, or most of the places I've been to, recommends 3 colors. So they are, I mean, pretty much legal. But I mean, we're definitely not going to stop here. This is just the start of it. So you can see I've painted chainmail here, just the chainmail color here for that little chink of chainmail sticking out underneath their armor. So we're ready to start doing some detailing now. Probably what we'll do next is we'll go ahead and do an ink wash. Actually, no. What we're going to do next is we're going to darken in the red. So we're going to take the red here, this red here from GW. I think it's called what is that? Wazdaka or Wazdaka red. Wazdaka red. And we're going to add a little bit of black to it, and we're going to go in and make sure that it's nice and runny. So make sure you add a lot of water to it, and then we're going to basically darken in the dark spots of their shirts. And then we're going to take a little bit of white and add it to that base color, and we're going to kind of do like a little dry brush on some of the highlights of the sleeves and stuff. So I've got some red here on my palette. I'm mixing some water with it. You can see here I've got a little bit of this black here. So I've darkened this red up a little bit. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to it. So it's a little bit runny here, like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and paint in some dark areas on their shirts. So I'll go ahead and do one of them, and then I'll stop the camera again and I'll get them all done. So you want to take a look at these shirts and say, okay, where are going to be the darks or the shadows? So there'll probably be some here in this little corner in here. Definitely underneath each of these little lips or ridges. I want to get some of those. So kind of do where, and if it's wet enough, it'll almost kind of slide in there into those dark areas for you, like the low parts of the shirt. So it's just really quick. I mean, that's just pretty much all you really need to do for each one of those. You can see how it's still wet there. Make sure that you keep it nice and wet so that it can get into those dark areas. Okay, so that's it for the red as far as the darkness goes. Now we're going to get some light red going. So again, we're going to take that base color red here on our palette, put it out there, and we're going to actually just take some white and mix a little of that in, almost so it's going to look kind of like a pink color. So you can see here, again on the palette, I've got some white and some of that red. Let's take a little bit of this white, mix it in there, a little bit more here. So you got a contrast there with your base color red, then your dark red, and then your light color. And same thing. Just make sure that you've got a nice wet, even mix. You don't want it too thin because then it's not going to cover anything. It's just going to be see-through. So then you got your pigment again, color that we want, and then we're going to hit the highlights of this shirt. So basically where the stuff didn't hit, kind of in between there where the crease of the shirt is, and the edges, I like to hit the edges there, like that. Hit the bottom here like that. And then what we'll do is we're going to hit it with almost a pure white after this on the final coat to really make some of this stuff pop. So just lightly touch that so that the highlights only is what the brush is hitting. So here we go. So we got some lights there and some darks. Okay, so once we got that done, then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do that basically for every base color. So we've got the red done. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to do their skin. Actually, before I do that, I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and do their faces. So what I do at that point is I want some darks to really darken in the features. So I'll take some black and I'm going to add a lot of water to black and make it almost like an ink, the consistency of ink. So you can see here on my palette I've got black right here, and you can see how it's almost like an ink. See how that is there on the, and that's, I probably want a little more black. It's a little runny, not too dark though, because if you go too dark you're going to cover everything up, but that's a good consistency there. So make sure your brush is nice and dark with that. We're going to ink wash basically their features. So as you see here, if you do this you're going to get black in on all those little crevices. And the thing, don't really worry too much about covering up a whole lot of detail, because it's a wash. So as long as you do it thin enough, you can just basically take your brush and just wipe that off. You're not going to cover anything up too much. But as you can see, what this does is it like puts like there in the chainmail there, you can see it's giving you some depth in the chainmail, so you're getting a little bit of dark on the chainmail there. The reason I do this is because I want to get some shading or some shadows into the face before I paint the light parts of the face. So you can see there you've got some dark in the ear now, and that. And this stuff, when it dries, it doesn't dry as dark, but it's nice to get some shadows in this on the areas where you know that there's not going to be a whole lot of light. So under here on the legs, probably use some. Definitely make sure you get plenty there, because this is what's going to pop the fingers so that you can see separation between your fingers there. See how that is? Like right there's be a lot of shadow here, some shadow under there, shadow there where the leg meets the thing, I guess the tunic or whatever it is. And like I said, don't worry too much about it being too dark, because we're going to use a light color over this to make this green really pop. But I want this black in here to get a lot of shadow. So it looks a lot darker now. But when we put another coat on there of the lighter colors, it's really going to pop it. So we got our wash done, and we've done a little bit of the white. Generally the best way to do it is probably do your wash first and then go over with the colors. I kind of go back and forth until I get the exactly what I like. So we're going to go ahead and at this point we'll do the second coat of color on the goblin's flesh. So that's going to be this what is this, Ogren camo or whatever it is. Now this stuff here, you want to make sure that you do have it nice and wet and not too thick, but not too thin. If you get it too thin, it's not going to cover anything, and it's just going to run in where your washes are. So you want to have it a little bit thicker than an ink wash, but you don't want to have it too thick, because you want to kind of have some of those darks and some of the darker color green that we painted to show through on the bottom. So it's kind of a tricky thing, but kind of this consistency here where I've added a little bit of water. It's a little runny, but not too bad. So I'll go ahead and do that part next. I actually got to run and take my daughter to tennis real quick, so I'm going to go ahead and pause this and then redo this part and go ahead and finish up their flesh. Okay, so I'm back. So I'm going to put a little bit of that new lighter green, because we're going to be doing the flesh now, on the tip of your brush here. Not really a whole lot, but just a little bit. And we're going to highlight. Oh, see, like that's a little too runny. It's alright. Just going to take a little bit of this, soak it up there. We got a little, it's a little too damp, so we need a little more pigment there. So I think that'll work. Try this again, because you don't want it getting into the cracks, because that's going to take away from your darks. There you can see we're highlighting the fingers there. I'm going to highlight his arm. Like I said, not too thick, because we don't want to cover up all of the dark green underneath. But enough to give it the look of variating flesh tones, I guess you'd say. I'm going to do his feet and his legs. So you can see the back foot there. And you don't have to paint all of it. You want to leave some of that darker tone underneath there. But you kind of do like highlights. So there's a little bit of the green there. Yep, see we got some on the black again, no big deal. We'll just cover that up. More. There we go.